it's really not until you can accept yourself fully that you can't even really have a healthy relationship with anybody else, because you don't even like you, right? Like, you're judging you. And so that means you're going to be in this constant state of always judging everybody else as well. So when you can meet yourself and just accept yourself for who you are, and that you're just a human, just trying to figure this thing out, forgiving yourself for mistakes, you just relax.
Welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna Podcast. This podcast is meant to encourage you to connect within so you can share your light with the world. And now, here's your host, Harrison Ma.
Welcome, beautiful beings, to the Cosmic Love Antenna. You found yourself on another episode of your weekly installment of your inner connection to your outer expression, here with your host, Harrison, and the beautiful, powerful guest and get the pleasure to introduce here in a second. We are here setting the intention of pulling back the layers, restricting health, alignment, and most importantly, love. And today's topic of self-love, divorce, and separation is going to do just that. But before I break this down for you, a quick reminder: if you're new to my words, new to this podcast, welcome. I can feel your energy. I appreciate you. If you are a regular listener, welcome back. Remember, ways that you can support this show is sharing this out to a friend, a family member, a partner, and maybe an ex-partner, that you can help them with the topics and the things we're going to hit on here today. You can go over to Apple and Spotify, leave your impressions and the things that bubble up for you in reviews. And remember now that over on Facebook, I have the Cosmic Love Antenna community and tribe. So if you're looking for more of these topics, more deep dives, and more relationship elements, head over to Facebook and join the family. With that said, I want to introduce the beautiful Leah Mazur today. She is a powerful coach in her own right. She focuses on divorce recovery. She's certified under this, in my opinion, a very needed and powerful paradigm. She's a beautiful soul in herself. And what we're going to do today is we're going to break down recovery from divorce. What is the role of self-love, getting to know yourself, the biggest mistakes, healing again, and the tools we can use, and attracting a partner back into your world. Leah, with all of that loving foundation, welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, my beautiful friend. All right, so let's start here, Leah. And this, I'm interested. You've shared this a little bit with me in our pre-podcast chat, but I think this is a good way to set the foundation here before I get into your expertise. I would love to know, and this is a question I ask everyone on the show: is what was your pain teacher? And I think I have a pretty good guess in relation to what it's connected to, but when you look back at your past in terms of what has led you to this moment right now with me, what was the big or multiple big moments that created you?
So I would have to take that back to when I was 16 years old, and I witnessed my mother have an asthma attack in our home and died. She was only 41 years old. And 5 years later, when I was 21, my father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and he passed away. And in between those two deaths, I was also in a very abusive, narcissistic relationship. So by 21, I had a whole lot of trauma. And so I was lost for a long time. And because I had so much healing that I needed to do that I really wasn't even aware that I needed to do. And I had abandonment issues from losing my parents. I was really so desperate for stability. And so I got married. I married somebody who was nice to me, and I thought would be a good partner, even though now in retrospect, I know there was so much missing from that relationship. But at the time I was just so desperate for stability. And when that marriage didn't work out, I did all the wrong things and everything you're not supposed to do, and jumped right into another relationship. I wound up getting married again, and then wound up with my second divorce. So those were really the loss of my parents were kind of the catalyst for why I started relationships for the wrong reasons to begin with, when I can look back. And then getting out of those relationships. And then that second divorce was really the catalyst for my self-healing journey and trying to figure out how to break those patterns so that I could get out of that hamster wheel and find happiness and peace and fulfillment.
We could end the podcast there. That is such a beautiful little journey of transformation, my friend. And a question that sort of arises in me on this, and we're going to break this down today, but I want to ask it now. And it's this idea of these unconscious elements that were running in the background, sort of attracting and molding in your case, the men coming into your life that caused challenge. And I want to ask you, how did you feel at the moment that you discovered that there were these unconscious elements sort of dictating, who you were attracting in terms of, and then the wounds that were coming up? How did you feel about it when you first discovered? And what's your view on it now? What's changed around this?
Well, I really didn't acknowledge what was going on until after my second divorce. And then I was able to look back more objectively and go, oh, okay, now I see why I made those choices and why I did what I did. And so when I first realized it, it was scary. I think it was, because I was like, man, is this just who I am? Like, is this just the life I'm leading and the patterns I'm going to be stuck in because this is what happened to me? And I've just got this trauma and I'm kind of stuck with it. And this is just a part of me now. It's overwhelming because you don't know how long it's going to take, right? Even if you decide, okay, I really need to work on this and try to figure this out, you don't know what that's going to look like or how long that's going to take or what that entails. So I was a little overwhelmed, but I was also at that point just so disappointed with how things kept unfolding for me. And so I knew I needed to do something.
Yeah.
If I was going to find peace finally and stability without needing another person to give that to me, I just had to do the work, and whatever it took or however long it takes, that's just it. But honestly, and you know this, Harrison, it never stops. I mean, I never got to a point where I'm like, I'm done now. We're good. Yeah, for the rest of your life, it's a daily, you have to be intentional about it.
Yeah. And that's why I asked the question, Leah. So thank you for sharing that. And this is something much like I haven't been through a separation and divorce. I've definitely been through challenging relationships, but I often see this in the work I do with the inner child, and I'm sure we'll get to that in a bit in relation to your work. But I think what's valuable for people to get from this thus far, on top of all the beautiful insights that Leah's giving here, is what would happen if we could, skip that step of, judging the fact that, I have this wound, I have this thing, and then leaning into the work, right? What if we could skip the step of, this is powerful, this is beautiful, and Leah, I'm sure you can add to this. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But when we do look back on those points, on those wounds, on those challenges, we can see that, yes, they needed to be healed and they attracted maybe a partner to help me see them, the unconscious elements, but ultimately they allowed me to be more, right? Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean, go ahead.
No, go for it. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I am a firm believer that every relationship we have, every person we meet really is like a mirror They're going to show you things you needed to see or teach you things you needed to know. And it's always a process. It's a never ending process, really. And one of the biggest, most important things in your healing journey is that self-compassion.
Yes.
Approaching things without judgment, because it's really not until you can accept yourself fully that you can't even really have a healthy relationship with anybody else, because you don't even like you, right? Like, you're judging you. And so that means you're going to be in this constant state of always judging everybody else as well. So when you can meet yourself and just accept yourself for who you are, and that you're just a human, just trying to figure this thing out, right? Like, nobody's got any cheat sheets. We're all just doing the best we can, forgiving yourself for mistakes, and just doing the best you could with what you knew at the time. You just relax, I think, a little bit. Just show yourself some grace.
Yeah. Even, and I love how you're going here, even showing yourself grace and forgiveness and compassion, like you beautifully said, for the shadow aspects, right? For the parts of you that you've yet to move through. Like you mentioned this before about there's no destination. So if there's no destination, that we must understand, we need to get understanding and compassionate about the journey itself. And how do we get understanding around the journey is loving the whole journey, right? Not just the parts of me that I have healed, but the beautiful shadow elements that are still present and still wounded, still open, and all the things. Leah, this sort of transitions now into what I want to ask you here next. And it's the role of self-love and getting to know yourself in divorce, in separation. So I want to throw this to you, and what bubbles up around this process. So I've been through a separation, I've been through a divorce, and now I have to realize I do need to start maybe forgiving myself and giving myself some more compassion. What does this look like?
Mm-hmm. So aside from forgiveness, being brutally honest with yourself, especially when I work with my clients who are women, they're incredibly intuitive, but a habit that I see is that they ignore the intuition or just kind of brush it off or write it off as something. And so it's getting back in tune with yourself is really important, because we all have that inner compass that can guide us. And that's really what you need to follow anyway, if you want to stay in alignment. But being honest with yourself, how do you really feel? What do you really want? What do you really need? Not what does this person want me to do, or what this person's expectations for me are. It's really you and your authentic self. What is that saying? And getting more aligned with that voice is huge. And another part of self-love, and it's kind of on the same lines as that, is boundaries. And that can be really hard for people to do, especially like recovering people pleasers like myself. It's tough because sometimes you have to have those uncomfortable conversations. You don't want to disappoint someone. You don't like conflict. You don't want to ruffle any feathers or disappoint people. But you have to say no when you need to, or when you feel like that's really your true answer. And that is a form of self-love. You're just being honest with yourself. And because if you're not setting your boundaries, nobody's going to. You're the only person that can do that, right? You're the guardian of your own energy. So you have to be calling the shots. And so that's a big part of self-love as well. And another really big part of self-love, which is also really difficult for a lot of people, is trying your best not to compare yourself to everybody else, because we're all on our own timelines. Like, things are happening at completely different points of our life for everybody. We've we were born to different families. We were born to, we've had different traumas. We've had different relationships. We have our own patterns and beliefs, and everyone is so different. So instead of comparing yourself to others, especially now in the age of social media, it's such a dangerous, slippery slope, to kind of just celebrate your own strengths. Everybody has something. Everyone has something that's unique to them, and it's something that nobody else has to offer. So what is that? What's your thing? Like, what kinds of strengths can you celebrate? And then embrace and so maybe, you don't look like that person, or you don't have that job, or you don't have that house, or whatever, but it's about you. Well, what's fulfilling you, right? What makes you you? And paying more attention to that and acknowledging those things. Another thing that you could do is acknowledge your successes. So that's a really good activity that helps nurture that self-love practice, is write down your successes, your big ones and your little ones, because when you can acknowledge your accomplishments, that's a confidence builder. And that's something that you should be doing, because it's so easy to get down on yourself for the things you maybe didn't do, or the things you thought you did wrong, or the mistakes that you made. But shift your perspective to all the good stuff. What are your wins, your big and your small? And then another big thing for self-love is really feeling your feelings.
Yeah.
And, people use that term all the time.
Leah, let me jump in there, because one's a big one. So we'll break that down, but I want to thank you for sharing those tips, because each of those in itself, we could do a whole episode on, because they're so important, not just for separation and divorce, but, as you're saying, self-love in general. And I think I want to go back to the boundaries piece, because I think that is a big one I see in my world, but I also see in the people I get to support. I see in my family members, and I want to ask a question around this, but just to set the stage with it first. One of the biggest definitions, and the most impactful definitions I've heard around what is a boundary, and it's the distance between me loving you and myself equally. And what I think is challenging around this, and this I think comes from many different resources and spaces and places, religion, the media, this mindset of scarcity in the world, is sacrifice, right? Putting the world outside of me, putting my partner, putting my family, putting, X before me. And in my experience, and it sounds like in yours too, this paradigm, this equation needs to be flipped, right? It's the image of when the plane's going down, and you need to protect your beautiful partner or your kids. Are you going to put the mask on them first, or are you going to put it on you, right? You're going to put it on you. But we seem to only think about that within that context. When it comes to relationships, when it comes to divorce, separation, all these things, we still get lost in this sacrifice of thyself for the other. So I want to ask you, my friend, is it just me? Am I just seeing this in my world, or do you see this a lot within maybe the people that come to see you?
Absolutely. I use that oxygen mask theory all the time, because it's true. And I think the narrative is, well, if you're putting yourself first, then you're selfish. And so one of my favorite boundary quotes is, the people who get defensive about your boundary are usually the ones who benefit from you not having one. Because a lot of times it's not even the actual boundary setting itself that's the tough part. It's dealing with other people's reaction to your boundary. So getting comfortable enough with yourself to know that you're being reasonable and that you don't have to explain yourself to anybody. And it is important to put yourself first. And especially because this is the thing I see a lot with moms, right? They're taught, well, you have to take care of everybody else, serve, make sure the kids have everything. But if you're constantly making sacrifices, then you're just teaching your kids that that's the way as well. Like they're learning from you. Oh, you don't do what you need to do. You do what other people expect from you. And so it's important to break that pattern and say, no, I am important. I am worthy. I deserve to feel these things and to have these things. And if I'm not giving myself what I need, then who's going to give it to me? And it doesn't make me selfish. It's important.
That's, I so happy you brought up the ancestral piece, from the parents. If you're listening to this and you find this pattern very hard to break, really first give yourself grace and compassion. Secondly, look at, as Leah's saying, look at your parents and how they raised you, and then notice some similarities, and then realize, oh, this is why it's so hard. It's because this has been entrenched, and it probably didn't stop with your parents, right? This is probably a reoccurring down your ancestral line. But the empowering piece here, and I'm sure you've noticed this too, my friend, is when you break that chain for yourself, you heal forwards and backwards. So now you're showing both your children and your parents what the example of the person that does put up healthy boundaries, does put their light and their love first, what it looks like, right? And this is it's a beautiful ripple effect.
Absolutely.
Let's go back to what you're saying, Leah, about feeling your feelings and the emotional tip. I want to continue hearing what you were saying, but I'll just put a little preface on this. As you're listening to our conversation today, and I like to say this in all my episodes, don't just listen to this with your beautiful mind, right? You can actually feel your feelings while you're listening to this show, right? When Leah sort of explains these sort of things, right? Remember that the emotions that are repressed and ignored and suppressed, they're here with you now. They're not some other place. They're in you. So just as Leah's going to sort of break this down, listen with your full being, and you might actually see an example of it as you are tuning in. So Leah, continue what you're saying about that sort of self-love tip.
Mm-hmm. So there's kind of two parts to it, kind of like what you said. You have to feel your feelings, whatever you're going through. That's just trapped energy in your body. You got to get it out. You have to feel it even when it's uncomfortable, because if you don't, and you just try to distract yourself, or you try to just shove it down, it's not going anywhere. You're just carrying it with you down the road, and it will come out in inopportune ways. It could come out at work. It could come out at your kids. It'll come out in future relationships. It doesn't go away. You have to acknowledge it and give it space, create space for it to feel it so you can process it in a healthy way, and then it will dissipate. And so that's half of it. And the other half, because people, I'm sure, hear it all the time, feel your feelings. And people are like, well, what the hell does that even mean? Like, what do you mean feel my feelings? It's you literally want to feel what the physical sensations are, right? Because every thought creates an emotion, and the emotions create feelings in your body. So what is actually going on? Tune into your body. When something happens, when you're triggered, when you're going through grief, where is it in your body? Did your heart rate speed up? Is your palms sweaty? Do you have kind of like a knot in your stomach? Tune into the physical sensations of that feeling and that emotion, and just let it be. Just sit with it so that it can go away, right? Give it attention. Don't reach for the alcohol, or don't reach for, Netflix, or I need to just go out and ignore it. And right. Just let it come up and come out.
Yes. So again, my friend, we might have to do another episode, because we could do another breakdown of just, because this is my world. What you're getting into now is this energetic release and expression of what we are. And I would add a couple things to this. One, that acceptance and that awareness of that feeling is so big, and Leah cannot be more correct. But I would add another layer to this if you feel like you want to go deeper. And it's two things: the breath and your energetic system in general. So first of all, with the breath, and I think, Leah, you probably do this too, is if that emotion that's coming up is very uncomfortable, which, let's be honest, if we're talking about divorce and separation, there's probably going to be a lot of those uncomfortable, anger, resent, rage, etc. Don't be afraid to breathe into it, right? Leah just talked about creating the space. What is one of the best ways we can create the space is by breathing into the area, right? But then, and I would love to get your thoughts on this, Leah. Well, I've noticed when you bring in the chakra system, we can start to really get even more specific with the area of the body that the thing is holding on to, right? So for example, I've noticed grief likes to hold itself around that heart space, right? Anger falls into that liver and that solar plexus area, and guilt and shame, that sacral womb area. Have you played around, or have you noticed the chakras or the energy centers playing a role in this kind of healing?
So I'm definitely not an expert in that area, and so I don't usually talk about it with my clients, but personally I have done some chakra work. I actually just recently did a sound bath. Have you ever done one of these?
Yep.
It's the first one I ever did. It was amazing. And at one point, the woman had the Tibetan bowl on my belly, and I felt like I wanted to cry. I felt like I was going to cry. And after the session, I told her that, and she said, "That is so interesting, because when I had it on your belly, I couldn't get the bowl to sing." And she said, and usually that's what that means, is that there is some kind of blockage there. So, I mean, I'm a big believer in all of that stuff, but I'm not, I don't know enough about it to kind of pass it along to my clients. But personally, I absolutely believe that our bodies hold on to those things. And, there's stuff that can get stuck, and there's things that you need to work on trying to move, or to unblock. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a whole deep dive. And just with the singing bowls, my friend, just for your understanding, each energy center, each chakra resonates at a different frequency, right? So when you use those bowls, they tap into the energy center that connects to that same frequency. So when that was on your belly, and this might tangent us, but just a little bit here, just for people's awareness, that frequency of the sound and the energy center, they play together. So, but if they're not playing together, then there is something in our field that is stopping the frequency from moving. What is that something? It's exactly what Leah's talking about. It's the repressed, ignored emotion, right? But this is really a point that I want to add here, and this goes back to what Leah was showing at the start. This is not happening to show you that you are a victim, to show you that you are broken, to show you that you're unfixable. It's happening so you can see it, bring awareness to it, to feel it, experience it, and come back into more of a healing state, right? And I think this is what I've come to an understanding of, is that our natural state is not one of dis-ease. Our natural state is not one of challenge, of suffering. It is one of balance. And there's always forces inside of us looking to bring us back to that state. Would you agree with that, my friend?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the yin and the yang, right? That's the balance. I think that kind of perspective is really helpful when you're going through difficult phases in your life, because you can kind of look at it like, well, yes, these things are happening. Maybe I don't understand why they're happening, but I can choose to believe that it is ultimately for my greater good. There's something in this that needed to happen in order for me to grow, heal, evolve, love myself harder, whatever, right?
Yeah. Which perfectly segues into another question I want to throw your way here now. What what do you think are the dangers of, well, not maybe the dangers is a bit harsh, the challenges around, I've been through a separation, I've been through a divorce, and now I'm jumping into another relationship. I'm going straight into the next person. What do you think are the challenges around this?
I think the challenge is, if you don't take the time to know you, then you're a lot less likely to know what you're even looking for in a partner. So you're probably choosing the wrong partner for the wrong reasons. And then you wind up in a relationship that's just really not as compatible as you had hoped. And then you wind up with another breakup or another divorce, or being stuck in a relationship with someone for the rest of your life that really doesn't feel right for you.
I think it's taking time here to, and this goes back to what we were saying before, analyzing why the separation occurred, right? And this is, again, going back to taking responsibility of your love and your power, but also now taking responsibility of what was your part in the challenge, right? Because we know, and I want to get your thoughts on this, a relationship is at least two people, right? So if there is a challenge going on, if there is, let's just use the example. Let's say the separation is a core stem was the other person was not there for us, or they weren't listening to us, or they weren't doing X need. Well, we could start with them and start blaming them, and there might be some justification for that. But are we asking the question, what did we do? What was our role in this? I'm wondering, Leah, what do you think that, how often are people asking this question?
Mm-hmm. It's huge. I mean, that's such an important question. I think people probably don't ask themselves that question enough, especially if they're coming out of relationships that maybe are a little more on the toxic side, because it is easier to play the blame game, point fingers and go, well, they did this and they did this and they did this. And it is important to still hold yourself accountable. And that's not to say we are excusing any toxic behavior, but what role did you play? What things do you not want to repeat in the future? What things do you want to make sure you learn from this relationship so that you can take with you into the future? What choices will you make differently next time? What are your boundaries next time? There's things that it's important to just cultivate that self-awareness and to have that space for yourself for that reflection, so that you are more aware and you hold yourself accountable. And when you're doing that, you can also set higher standards for the person that you choose to be in a relationship with moving forward.
I wonder where the solicitors and the beautiful souls out there in the world that work with separation and divorce, I wonder how different the world would be in regards to that. I'm wondering if you've thought about this, my friend, if we all did these sort of things, right? If we all had this analysis, if we all had this self-reflection, do you think there would be, and I think of the beautiful people in my life that have been through these kinds of situations, and I think of just all the legal steps hoops they've moved through because of, just in all honesty, the unhealthy steps that were taken. Do you think that this whole industry around, the souls that support and support these beings through the legal system, do you think that would exist if we had all these steps?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe not. Because there is, sometimes even if you realize that you have to create that self-awareness and have that self-reflection, sometimes it is still difficult to see things objectively. and depending on where you are in your journey, like how deep in your journey you are and how long you've been practicing that kind of thing. So sometimes even when your intention is, yeah, I'm trying to do the best I can, we're still sometimes just stuck in those patterns and those belief systems because we don't know how to see the world any other way. And sometimes when it's not brought to your attention, you're not even aware that that's how you think, or that's why you think that way, or that's where that belief came from, to even give yourself the opportunity to challenge that belief. So I think that's why, at least like when therapists and coaches and when they come into play, I think that's why that's so important. I feel like everyone should work with a therapist or a coach at one point, because there's someone who can objectively kind of show you, like, hold yourself up to yourself and show you different perspectives. And that's so helpful. I mean, that can literally change the trajectory of your life sometimes, just by someone going, hey, well, did you ever think that this was an option? And you go, oh, shit, no, I didn't. But that's I'm so happy you brought that to my attention, right? Or, you keep bringing this up. Are you aware that this is something that you bring up over and over, right? And then the person may be like, oh, I didn't even realize that was how I was thinking about it. So I think sometimes even when you're taking the initiative to heal, it's still really beneficial to have other people help you, show you the things that you just really wouldn't be able to see if it weren't for their perspective.
Yeah, it makes total sense. We don't know what we don't know. And another analogy I think that highlights this beautifully is the frog in the well knows nothing of the ocean, right? We see the walls around us and we think that's the reality, right? And as you're beautifully saying, but there is such a bigger expansive of potential outside of us if we could purely just peep up over that wall, right?
Yeah. So it's about being open, really, right? It's about just being open and not attaching yourself to any specific outcome.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the most empowering things you can do. Is that's how you kind of find your flow, is to not close those walls on yourself.
Yeah. Leah, I want to jump in now to some tools that we can use in this process. And we've talked about a couple. We've mentioned forgiveness. We've talked about sort of self-reflection, doing the inner sort of self-love work, self-care, self sort of understanding of what we want, what we don't want, the boundaries. That was a powerful tip. What are some others that pop up? And I'll give another example here just to maybe stimulate your beautiful mind. I've spoken about this earlier, is the power of inner child work, right? And as Leah talked about in her story at the start, many of our patterns that we repeat in our adult relationships, especially the negative ones, we could stem back to a wound in our childhood from our caregivers, a wound of abandonment or a wound of rejection, or an insecure attachment style. So when we do inner child work and we parent that beautiful little inner being, give he or she what she deserves, then we attract a partner from this space of competency or fullness rather than of less and unhealed. So what bubbles up for you, my friend, around some of these tools?
I often recommend meditation as a tool, because not only is that helping you cultivate self-awareness, tune into yourself, right? Because it's a practice. It's a grounding exercise. When you're going through something like divorce or really anything, sometimes you just get shaken up and you need to center yourself again. And so that's a really great tool for that. But it also teaches you to not get caught up in your thoughts and your emotions. And that's something that can impact every aspect of your life. Because if you're just on autopilot and you're letting your emotions just take you for a ride all the time, you're going to be way out of whack. You're going to feel stressed, overwhelmed. You probably won't sleep well. And so when you can practice meditation, you stay tethered to that throughout the day. you can catch yourself kind of getting caught up in your thoughts, and then pull back and become the observer of them, and then make more rational choices that aren't based off of emotional reactivity.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate here for you, Leah. This is something that I hear all the time, and if I had a dollar for every time I heard this, I'd be a very rich man. What would you say to the person that responds to you with that practice and says, "But I can't sit still. I just keep thinking all the time, and I just can't be in that quiet space and do nothing. It's impossible to switch my brain off." What do you say to that individual self?
I hear it all the time. The immediate resistance, that's not for me. I can't do it. And so how I like to explain it is, it's not about turning off your mind, right? You're on any given day, your brain is going to pump out anywhere from 60 to 80,000 thoughts. It's just a thought factory. And unless you're dead, you can't turn it off. It's just going to keep doing its job. So the practice isn't necessarily clearing your mind. The practice is when you acknowledge that your mind's drifted off to, oh, what am I going to make for dinner? Oh, I'm supposed to email that person back. You can acknowledge that happened, and then without judgment, gently bring yourself back again. So focusing on your breath is the most simple thing, just sitting down and just physically, paying attention to the physical sensations of your breath. Feel the air coming in your nose, feel the chest filling up, your belly filling up, and just try to hold your attention on that and what's happening. And your mind will drift. It may drift 100 times in 10 minutes. It doesn't mean you suck at meditating. It doesn't mean you can't learn. The bicep curl here really is acknowledging that happened and then bringing yourself back again. That's the exercise. And so a good way to start it for beginners is it's just set a timer, because if you just sit down and you give yourself a couple minutes, you're like, it's not working. It's easy to quit. But if you just set a timer, even if you're just starting, maybe even 10 minutes, just sit there for 10 minutes. Just sit, because the brain really is like a monkey in a cage, right? So if you let it, it's just going to go wild, but you can train it to settle in. And guided meditations are really great too for people who have trouble just focusing on their breath. There's tons of free guided meditations and apps, because that gives you something to pay attention to. You can kind of follow along and listen so that you're out of your own brain, basically. Yeah. And that's why they call it a meditation practice. I mean, no matter how long, I've been doing it for years now, and it's not like I sit down and my mind just goes blank. I'm drifting all the time, but I know the benefits of maintaining that practice and just, again, non-judgment, self-compassion. You gently bring yourself back to center again, and you do that as many times as you need to. And that is meditation.
Yeah. So that was beautiful, my friend. That was a lovely outline there. And I'll add a couple things to this. First of all, for the left-brained sort of getting stuff done, the over masculine men and women listening to this that just want to get stuff done all the time, I'm going to say to you that if you're a person that's thinking a lot, that is beautiful in this meditation, because you have a lot of opportunity for those beautiful bicep curls that Leah was just talking about, right? The more thoughts that we have, the more opportunity now that we get to flex that muscle, right? Seeing the thought, coming back to the breath, seeing the thought, coming back to the breath, seeing the thought, coming back to the breath. Each time you do that, that is you strengthening this practice. But I'll go a little bit deeper here, and why is this helpful? Other than the fact of being grounded and presencing and coming back to yourself, what are you coming back to, right? And I'm just going to plant the seeds for people listening to think about this. This act of meditation, it's doing a couple things. The first thing it's doing is that with the act of coming back to the breath, we're seeing that we are not those thoughts. Most of us in this, especially within this context of separation and divorce, we become reactionary, and we feel that is the only way to be. But there is another option, right? There's responding to the world instead of reacting to the world. And how do we respond? Well, we realize that we are not our emotions and we are not our thoughts, right? These are things that move through us, as Leah beautifully highlighted before. The emotions, we want to acknowledge them so they can move up and out. But this also applies to our thoughts. The thoughts that we have, those 10,000, 60 to 80,000, they are a part of us, but they are not us. So this is the other thing I would encourage people to sit with. And I want to maybe get your thoughts on this too, Leah. If we are jumping back and forth from the thoughts to this state of breath, what is the thing? What is the thing that's doing that? Who is the thing that's doing that is a part of you? If you can ask that question, then that's going to take you into a whole other deep reality, but it's going to make this relationship and this divorce and this separation, it's going to put it into context. Does that resonate, Leah, with what you're saying?
Yeah. And like helping you separate yourself from your ego. Are you operating from your ego? Or and so a good point you brought up is, we are not our thoughts, and which that in and of itself sometimes is just mind blowing for people. They're like, what do you mean? Right? What do you mean? But so a good tool or a good exercise to help you on that journey, separating yourself from your thoughts, is naming that voice. So specifically for that negative self-talk, right? That like negative Nancy that lives up there that likes to put doubt in your mind or tell you you're not good enough to do things, name it. Mine, her name's Maxine. Okay. She's real spicy, and she's not always nice. So when I hear those thoughts, I can separate myself from them and I can say, okay, I hear you, Maxine, but I don't have to believe you. Just because you're speaking doesn't mean you're speaking the truth.
Yes. I love that practice. Thank you for adding that tool in. I've used that as well. And you could add another name to the thing that's not Maxine, right? Because if we're not in our ego and our mind, where are we? Right? In many ways, we're spending time in our spirit, in our soul, right? So you could name that too. So now you're really acknowledging where your consciousness is spending its time, right? And making a choice of being different, right? Because we feel like we don't want to be the victim here. We want to take our power back and realize where we are at any given moment. Leah, I've really enjoyed this chat, my friend, and I have a couple of questions left here I want to throw at you. The next one here is, I know that you work predominantly with women, but I have a feeling that you've thought about this or at least acknowledged it. I'm wondering, what do you think are the main differences between a divorce and separation from the physical male's view and the physical female's view? Is there a difference between this in your perspective?
So to answer this question, my mind goes to the feedback that I get from the men and women. So I post, content regularly. And so I get a lot of feedback from men and women, even though I only coach women. And from the feedback, and this is not coming from a judgmental place, it's just kind of what I'm hearing, is that women tend to just want to or tend to process and communicate their emotions in a very different way. I think historically men are not taught how to process and communicate their emotions. This is another generational thing, where they're taught that if they are feeling their feelings, then they're too weak or too feminine, or there's something wrong with them. So we wind up with men who don't, and that's a problem in relationships. And so I think because women are just more apt to go there and to want to heal and to take the initiative to heal, to say, I need to do something here and hold themselves accountable, take responsibility, and then take action and actually do it. I think the ratio is just off.
Yeah. I think you're spot on, my friend. And I don't work with people in separation divorce, but I can speak for myself. And as a man that did grow up in that world and did experience that exact challenge of, stories and beliefs projected onto me that I then created as my own, that when I did express my emotions, that I was not being manly or masculine. I was being too feminine. If I was being too feminine, then that is not what a man should look like. And, for any men listening, not only could this not be further from the truth, I'm here to tell all of you listening that when you express your emotions, not whether you are a man or a woman, but let me just speak to the men. When you express your emotions, not only are you not being too feminine or not enough of the masculine, you're actually being more of what you are, right? We just talked about how we're not our emotions, we're not our thoughts, but they are there for a reason. They are there to communicate what is needed so we can take a step forward to heal not only ourselves, but the people in our world. So when we allow that expression, and it could be as simple as what Leah beautifully said before, I feel angry right now, or I feel sad right now, or I feel guilty right now, acknowledging that communication that's moving through us, we're actually allowing ourselves to be ourselves. How people perceive this, how an outside force, person, place, or thing perceives this expression, that's their thing. That's whatever they're going through. If you feel like it's supporting and helping you, full stop.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's important that really as a society, we need to be more accepting of the fact that each individual is a spectrum. It's not just, well, this is you, and this is you. It's not black and white, cut and dry. Every single person is a spectrum in and of themselves. I think we would be so much more loving as a whole if we could just accept people just for wherever they are, meeting them where they're at.
I think I think I look into the future and I imagine a world like that, right? And you have a lot of, I think, the collective. This is how we change the collective, right? When we embrace the individual spectrum, that changes the collective spectrum, right? I think maybe I'll get your thoughts on this, Leah. Not only do we feel separate from our partners sometimes, which leads to all of the challenges we've talked about today, but I think there is a separateness that we feel from the collective, the whole, right? And we can feel like I'm over here doing my thing and then the collective's over here. But we've experienced this from a negative lens, where we experience that when the collective goes through something bad, we feel it as the individual. But there's also at the same time, there's something inside of us simultaneously that doesn't allow us to feel the good things of the collective. So I guess the question is, do you feel that as individuals going through a healthy separation, healthy divorce, that does impact the collective consciousness around this?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that we're all connected. I think everything affects the collective, right? I think anytime anybody can cultivate self-awareness and self-acceptance, what they do in turn is create outer acceptance. Because the people who are so judgmental are the people who are really at first being so self-critical. So if you can accept and be compassionate with yourself truly, that is also how you show up in the world. And then you show everyone else more acceptance and more compassion.
It's a wonderful future that I feel we're all moving towards. I think we're all taking steps, but I can see it shifting. Leah, the second last question here I want to throw at you, I think is important I've seen it in my life in terms of, we talked before about how we want to get out of that well, right? We want to see what is beyond our current belief system and what we know, and we want to see what is the potential for us as the individual and the relationships we want to bring in. And it's the role of experimenting and testing things out. And, when we do separate and we're in that divorce process, experimenting can play a very big role in this sort of breaking free of the belief system. So I want to ask you, my friend, what is your perspective on experimentation within this process, and why is it such a powerful outlet?
Do it all. Do it all. Because that's how you learn who you are. What are you drawn to? What excites you? What lights you up? What are you passionate about? What kinds of things don't feel good for you? You're not going to know until you kind of put yourself in the position to experiment and to discover those pieces of yourself. So it's such an important part in healing, especially after divorce and separation, because oftentimes that was your identity. People come out of these relationships and then they're like, well, now what? Like, who am I now? I don't even know, right? So that's the time to experiment. Try everything. Like, if you were like, man, I think it'd be cool to take a dance class, do it. I don't care how old you are. I don't care what you look like. Do it. If that's what feels right for you. If you're drawn to that, then you're drawn to it for a reason. That inkling isn't there just because, it's there for a reason. And so follow it. If you want to pick up that camera and take some nature photography, if you really want to do some slam poetry, whatever, if there's something in you that you feel maybe would be interesting or exciting, let it out. Do it. Try all the things, and then it'll help you figure out who you are. And that's really where fulfillment comes from, right? I mean, you have to make that for yourself. The only way to find fulfillment is to do the things that you're kind of drawn to, so that you can start putting those pieces, on your own puzzle.
I think it's so powerful. With this experimentation, we also get the opportunity, and you alluded to this, of taking off the masks that are no longer serving us, right? I think when we are in that relationship for who knows how long, we unconsciously put on a lot of things that define us, which is often those belief systems, our age, the things, how we've been living, how we've been interacting. And I think a big part of that urge, like you're alluding to experiment, is the desire inside of us to take off those masks, right? And just do the thing for the sake of doing the thing. And if you find yourself, and this is probably the asterisk I would add, even if you find a new mask to put on, and it's a beautiful one, right? Let's say it is the dancing, like you said. Look at the fulfillment and the joy and the pleasure that the dancing gave you. And a deeper question to ask is, did the dancing give you that fulfillment? Or through this opportunity of the separation and the divorce, did that dancing awaken the thing that might have been pushed down for a long time? Does that resonate?
Yeah. And a lot of times it's also just fear of other people's judgments,
yes,
and right, their opinions and their criticism. Well, I don't want to do this thing because I'm this, they might think this of me, or they might say this. And I have a great example for you. So I have always loved to sing since I can, as far back as I can remember. I've always loved to sing. My dad was a musician. And something happened at some point in my life where I just became deeply terrified of singing in front of people, just this severe performance anxiety. And so when I was home alone, I would sing like a bird all day long in my car, in the shower, whatever, because I would love it. And I felt like I wished I could share it. Like I wish I could sing and somehow have music be more of a part of my life. But that fear of judgment or failure blocked me. It was like just a wall, just a brick wall. And after my second divorce, as part of my healing process, I decided that I needed to work on that to try to take that wall down brick by brick. And I connected with some music people, and they were auditioning lead vocals for a classic rock cover band. And this is just like local stuff, right? I'm not trying to get like a record deal. So I said to myself, okay, I'm just going to show up. And I don't even care what happens after that. My goal is just to show up, and I will be so proud of myself just for doing that. And so I was listening to like confidence affirmations and hypnosis, and I was really trying to like, pump myself up. And, I was like sweating and shaking. And I mean, it was like terrifying. I really had this anxiety, but I showed up. I just gave it the best I could. I just did the best that I could do, which is all I was preparing for. And I got it. They wanted me to be the lead vocalist. Even if that didn't happen, like I said, I just wanted to show up. That in and of itself was a huge feat for me, right? And so now this years later, I'm singing. I'm with a different band, but now we're performing in front of people all the time, and I'm doing it. I'm getting up on stage. I'm having fun. I'm in my passion, and I'm fulfilling myself. I'm doing the thing that I always knew, that I always had in the back of my mind, that I wished I could do, but I just let that fear constantly stop me from doing it. And once I decided I wasn't going to care how bad it sounded, I wasn't going to care what anybody else had to say, I wasn't going to care what happened, right? I detached from the outcome. I just showed up and I did the thing that I wanted to do, and that felt right for me. And I just kept showing up. I just kept doing it. And then I got better and better. And now it really is a part of my life. It's become woven into a part of my life. And it's a piece of me that I've always had, that I was just scared to show everyone else.
What a beautiful story, my friend. Thank you have you shared that story before? Did that just burst out of you?
I don't know if I've shared it on a podcast.
No, I love it.
Or maybe as part of like a try everything, right? Like whether it's photography, dancing, whatever, because that's what fulfillment is. And for me, it just happens to be singing. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I've shared the whole thing.
It's beautiful because it's a beautiful summary of what we've been talking about here today. And a couple of things I would say to this beautiful epilogue and expansion that you just explained. If the fear, I'll share some quotes here around this, right? Fear, we could define as false evidence appearing real, right? There's these fears that come up and it's like, are they actually the thing that's going to happen? Am I actually going to die? Am I actually going to be ostracized from the tribe? Am I actually going to explode on stage when I start singing? No, most of the time that's not the case. But also what fear is a opportunity to step into what our soul wants us to do, right? We've been talking about the ego, right? And the soul and the spirit. The ego is often, if not the only space that fear resides, right? What is the opposite of fear? The opposite of fear is love and unity and coming back together, coming back to our truth. And I shared this with my beautiful father the other day in relation to this topic of separation and divorce. And another powerful quote around fear is from Joseph Campbell, right? And Joseph Campbell says, fear is the cave that we fear to enter, but holds the treasures that we seek. And could not explain it more beautifully with what your story just highlighted, right? It's stepping into something and remembering our truth through the fear, not by rejecting, not by ignoring, not by sheltering in place, but by lovingly and compassionately and gracefully surrendering and letting go into the fear, right? And realizing, oh, there's a choice that I have here. And in case people are picking this up, this is not a divorce and a separation thing. This is a all aspect life thing with this fear, and it just happens to show up in this context. So, Leah, thank you for sharing that story with me. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and love you and the work that you're doing in the world. If people have connected to your voice, they want to speak to you, connect to you, find out more about your work in the world, how can people get in touch? What do you want to share with my audience?
Thank you. So go to mindfullyready.com. That's my website. You can learn a little bit more about me if you'd like, and you can schedule a free consultation call. We can chat about things and see if working one-on-one is the right fit for you.
Love it. And as always, beautiful souls, if you go to the details, wherever you're listening to this podcast, Spotify, Apple, you'll see Leah's links. You can just click on them straight away, go straight to her website. Leah, I have one more question for you before you finish here. And the name of my podcast is The Cosmic Love Antenna. And the main intention is to help people pull back a lot of the layers that restrict our divine love from expressing itself. And we've hit on little pieces of this today. And I'm wondering, in your experience, your reality, how do you personally define that love word?
I think my answer would be acceptance. I think love is accepting what is, not trying to change it, but to meet it with compassion, with empathy, and that non-attachment to outcomes, right? Just meeting it where it is, and truth.
Beautiful, my friend. I got a lot of unconditional vibes there, washing off your definition. Leah, I love you very much. Thank you for spending time with us. Beautiful listeners out there in the podcast world, thank you for giving us your attention, your hearts. We hoped we have connected you to some deeper understandings around divorce and separation and self-love. Remember, if we have, share this out to someone in your life that's maybe going through this kind of challenge that you know this can help. But until next time here on the show, we wish you a wonderful evening, morning, and afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And we're sending you lots of love and light. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast. We hope you enjoyed. Be sure to follow Harrison on Instagram, Twitter, and Clubhouse at Harrison Ma. That's Harrison, Meagher.